My mother's charity donations went to a fake organization. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Mom's bank statement on her kitchen counter. The neat columns of numbers that had always been my second language suddenly felt like hieroglyphics spelling out disaster. Margaret, honey, you're early. Mom called from the living room, her voice carrying that forced brightness she'd perfected since Dad's funeral 3 years ago. I just put the kettle on. But I couldn't move from the kitchen island, my eyes locked on the Chase Bank statement dated October 15, 2023. Withdrawal after withdrawal, each one for exactly $847.50, stretching back months. June 3rd, June 17th, July 1st, July 15th, a precise pattern that made my CPA brain scream, fraud, in neon letters. Mom, I called back, my voice steadier than I felt, can you come here for a second? At 73, Eleanor Chin still moved with the determined grace of someone who'd beaten stage 2 breast cancer and wasn't about to let anything else slow her down. She appeared in the doorway wearing her favorite cardigan, the blue one with tiny pearl buttons that Dad had bought her for their 40th anniversary. What's got you looking so serious, sweetheart? She noticed the statement in my hands and her expression shifted, a flash of something, guilt? Embarrassment, crossing her weathered features. I held up the paper. Mom, these withdrawals. $11,660 since June. What's going on? Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she moved to the coffee maker with unnecessary focus. I've been meaning to tell you about that. Tell me about what exactly? I kept my voice gentle, but my pulse was hammering. As the family's financial advisor, both professionally and personally, I'd been managing Mom's investments since Dad passed. Her savings account should have been growing, not hemorrhaging money in mysterious bi-weekly chunks. It's for the Henderson Cancer Research Foundation, she said, still not meeting my eyes. They're doing incredible work, Margaret. Dr. James Henderson himself calls me personally to update me on their progress. Did you know they're just months away from a breakthrough treatment that could? Wait, stop. I set the statement down carefully. Dr. Henderson calls you personally. Every 2 weeks. Now there was pride in her voice, the same tone she'd used when telling neighbors about my promotion to senior associate at Morrison & Associates. He says my donations are making a real difference. That survivors like me are the backbone of their research funding. A cold knot formed in my stomach. How much have you donated total, Mom? She busied herself arranging already perfect dish towels. Well, I started small in March. Just 500 here and there. But when Dr. Henderson explained how close they were to a breakthrough, how my monthly contribution could sponsor an entire research trial, she finally looked at me, her eyes bright with the same fierce determination she'd shown during chemo. What else am I going to do with Dad's life insurance money? Sit on it while people are dying from the same disease that almost took me? The number hit me like a physical blow when I calculated it. If she'd been donating $847.50 every 2 weeks since March, we were looking at over $15,000. And that was just what showed on this statement. Mom, I said quietly, I need to see all your bank statements from this year. Right now. The way her face crumpled told me everything I needed to know. We weren't dealing with $15,000. We were dealing with something much, much worse. The full scope of the devastation became clear an hour later, my laptop screen glowing with the harsh reality of downloaded bank records spanning 8 months. Mom sat beside me at her dining table, the same oak table where she taught me long division 20 years ago, clutching a mug of tea that had long gone cold. $53,400, I said, my voice hollow. The number felt obscene in the quiet room. Mom, that's almost your entire inheritance from Dad. She stared at the spreadsheet I'd created, each donation meticulously catalogued. The amounts had escalated over time, $500 in March, $650 in April, then settling into that relentless $847.50 every 2 weeks starting in May. But there were bonuses too, $2, $300 in July 4, emergency equipment, $1,800 in September 4, clinical trial acceleration. He said the emergency funding was critical, she whispered. That without it, they'd lose 6 months of progress. I couldn't, how could I say no to that? Tell me exactly how this started. I minimized the spreadsheet, unable to look at those numbers anymore. Everything you remember. Mom's hands shook slightly as she set down her mug. It was a Wednesday morning in March. I remember because I'd just gotten back from my 6-month oncology checkup, clean scan again, praise God. The phone rang, and this lovely man introduced himself as Dr. James Henderson from the Henderson Cancer Research Foundation. He said he was calling survivors personally to thank them for their courage and to invite them to join their mission. He knew you were a survivor. He knew everything. Her voice carried a mixture of wonder and embarrassment. My diagnosis date, my oncologist's name, Dr. Patricia Valdez, even that I'd had the lumpectomy at Presbyterian. He said they'd gotten my information from a national survivor registry, that they only reached out to people who truly understood the fight. I pulled out my phone and opened a new browser tab. What did he sound like? Oh, wonderful. Warm, professional. Maybe 55 or 60, with just a slight southern accent. Very educated, he used medical terms I recognized from my own treatment. Her eyes grew distant. He talked about his late wife, Sarah, who died from ovarian cancer. Said that's why he dedicated his life to research, why every dollar mattered so much. A quick Google search for Henderson Cancer Research Foundation returned nothing. No website, no charity registration, no Dr. James Henderson affiliated with any legitimate cancer research organization. Mom, when he calls, does the number show up on your caller ID? She nodded, reaching for the cordless phone on the kitchen counter. I actually saved it. Here, Henderson Foundation. She showed me the saved contact, 472-555-0891. I ran the number through a reverse lookup service, my accounting firm's subscription giving me access to detailed records. The results made my blood run cold. This number is registered to a Vincent Carruthers in Albuquerque, I said. Not Dr. James Henderson. Mom's face went pale. That can't be right. He's calling me tomorrow at 2 o'clock. He always calls at 2 on Fridays to discuss the next phase of funding. Tomorrow was Friday. which meant I had less than 18 hours to figure out exactly who Vincent Carruthers was and how many other elderly cancer survivors he was destroying with his lies. But more importantly, I had 18 hours to decide whether to let Mom answer that call, or whether I should answer it myself. I spent the rest of Thursday night doing what I do best, following the money trail. While Mom fitfully slept upstairs, I turned her dining room into a makeshift war room, my laptop surrounded by printed bank statements, legal pads covered in notes, and enough coffee to fuel a small accounting firm through tax season. Vincent Carruthers wasn't just some amateur phone scammer. This bastard was a professional. The deeper I dug, the more sophisticated his operation became. The phone number traced back to a legitimate business address, Henderson Medical Research LLC, registered in New Mexico with Carruthers listed as Director of Development. He'd filed proper paperwork, obtained a business license, even set up a convincing website that had somehow evaded my initial Google search. The website was a masterpiece of manipulation. Stock photos of diverse, smiling researchers in lab coats. Testimonials from grateful families. A mission statement about bridging the gap between cutting-edge science and compassionate care. Most damning of all, a photo of Dr. James Henderson, a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes that I reverse searched to a Getty Images stock photo titled Confident Medical Professional. But it was the financial structure that revealed the true scope of his predation. Henderson Medical Research LLC was connected to 3 other shell companies, all registered within the past 18 months. Cross-referencing the business addresses with public records, I found complaints filed with the New Mexico Attorney General's office. 12 complaints so far, all from elderly individuals, all claiming fraud totaling over $400,000. $400,000. Mom wasn't his only victim, she was part of a systematic campaign targeting cancer survivors across the Southwest. At 3:17 a.m., I found the smoking gun buried in a consumer protection forum. A post from 8 months ago by someone named Susan M_Phoenix. Please help. My 81-year-old father has donated his entire retirement account, $67,000, to something called Henderson Cancer Research Foundation. The man calling himself Dr. Henderson knew everything about Dad's prostate cancer treatment, even details I thought were private. We can't find any legitimate organization by this name. Dad is devastated and won't eat. Has anyone else encountered this? The responses broke my heart. 17 replies from adult children describing nearly identical scenarios. Elderly parents, all cancer survivors, all contacted by the same worn, knowledgeable Dr. Henderson. The amounts ranged from $15,000 to $89,000. Every story ended the same way, financial ruin and crushing shame. One response, posted just 2 weeks ago, made me physically sick. My mother passed away last month. The stress of realizing she'd been scammed out of $73,000 sent her into a severe depression. She kept saying she betrayed my father's memory by losing his life insurance money. I'm posting this from the funeral home. Vincent Carruthers wasn't just stealing money. He was killing people. I screenshot everything, saved PDFs, and started building a comprehensive file. But as the first gray light of dawn crept through Mom's kitchen windows, I realized something that made my hands shake with rage. The complaints in New Mexico were all from 2023. Which meant Carruthers had been operating for at least a year before he'd targeted Mom in March. The authorities knew about him, had known about him, and he was still making calls, still destroying lives, still walking free. The legal system had failed these families. The regulatory agencies had failed them. Even the goddamned FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center had failed them, based on the frustrated follow-up posts I'd found. But Vincent Carruthers had made one critical mistake. He'd targeted the wrong accountant's mother. At 6:43 a.m., I heard Mom's footsteps on the stairs. In 6.5 hours, her phone would ring. Dr. Henderson would deliver his compassionate update on breakthrough research that didn't exist, funded by donations that had gone directly into Carruthers' personal accounts. I closed my laptop and started making breakfast, my mind crystallizing around a single, dangerous thought. Maybe it was time for Dr. Henderson to meet a new kind of patient. Mom emerged from the stairwell looking like she'd aged 5 years overnight, her usually perfect silver hair disheveled and her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee mug. The weight of yesterday's revelations had settled into the lines around her eyes. I kept thinking about Mrs. Patterson, she said quietly, not meeting my gaze. You remember her, from my cancer support group. She passed last spring. I looked up from my laptop, where I'd been reviewing Vincent Carruthers' business registration documents. What about her? She mentioned getting calls from some research foundation. Said they were so knowledgeable about her treatment history. Mom's voice cracked. I thought she was lucky to be chosen. I was actually jealous that they hadn't called me yet. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Mom, how many people from your support group got these calls? I don't know. We didn't really discuss it much. You know how private people get about money. She finally looked at me, her eyes red-rimmed. Oh God, Margaret. How many of us did he target? I was already pulling up the Presbyterian Hospital website, navigating to their cancer support services page. Dr. Patricia Valdez, Mom's oncologist, ran 3 different survivor groups with a combined membership of over 40 people. If Carruthers had somehow accessed their patient database. I need to make some calls, I said, reaching for my phone. Starting with Dr. Valdez's office. It's 7 in the morning, sweetheart. They won't be. They'll be open. My voice came out harder than I intended. This can't wait. The receptionist at Presbyterian's Oncology Center was initially resistant until I mentioned potential HIPAA violations and patient financial fraud. Within 3 minutes, I was transferred to Janet Morrison, the hospital's compliance officer. Ms. Chen, I need to be very careful about what information I can share, Morrison said after I explained the situation. But I can tell you we've had concerns about unauthorized contact with our cancer patients. What kind of concerns? A long pause. In the past year, we've received 17 complaints from current and former patients about unsolicited calls from various research foundations. The callers demonstrated knowledge of protected health information that should have been impossible to obtain. 17 complaints. From one hospital. My stomach churned. Have you reported this to authorities? We filed reports with both state and federal agencies 6 months ago. The investigation is ongoing. The frustration in Morrison's voice was palpable. The problem is proving how the information was obtained. These criminals are sophisticated. They use just enough accurate details to establish credibility, then rely on publicly available information and educated guesses for the rest. But the medical specifics can often be inferred from other sources. Support group attendance records, pharmacy benefit claims, even social media posts about treatments. A skilled social engineer can piece together a convincing medical history from surprisingly little actual data. I thought about Mom's Facebook posts from 2019, photos from the hospital, grateful updates about clean scans, thank you messages to her medical team. All public. All searchable. Ms. Morrison, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Is this Vincent Carruthers connected to anyone at Presbyterian? Any staff, any contractors, anyone with access to patient information? The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Ms. Chen, Morrison finally said, I cannot confirm or deny any ongoing internal investigation. But I strongly recommend you contact Detective Sarah Rodriguez with the Albuquerque Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit. She's familiar with this particular case. After hanging up, I stared at my phone, a terrible realization forming. This wasn't just about stolen patient lists or public information gathering. Vincent Carruthers had an inside source. And in 4 hours, he was going to call my mother again. I called Detective Rodriguez at 9:30 a.m., expecting to leave a voicemail. Instead, a gravelly voice answered on the second ring. Rodriguez, Financial Crimes. Detective, this is Margaret Chin. Janet Morrison at Presbyterian Hospital said you're familiar with Vincent Carruthers and the Henderson Cancer Research Foundation scam. A sharp intake of breath. How familiar are you with this case, Ms. Chin? My 73-year-old mother has been scammed out of $53,000 over the past 8 months. She gets her next progress update call at 2 o'clock today. Jesus Christ. I heard papers shuffling. 53. That puts him over $500,000 total. Ms. Chen, I need you to listen very carefully. Do not let your mother take that call. Do not confront Carruthers yourself. This investigation is extremely delicate. Delicate how? Rodriguez paused. We believe Carruthers has an accomplice inside Presbyterian Hospital system. Someone with access to patient records, treatment histories, personal information. We've been building a case for months, but we need more evidence before we can move. The bottom dropped out of my stomach. So you're just going to let him keep stealing while you build your case? My mother isn't the only victim from her support group. I understand your frustration, but... No, you don't understand. My voice rose, causing Mom to look up from her crossword puzzle with concern. I lowered my tone. Detective, I found forum posts about victims who've died from the stress. People who've lost their homes, their dignity, their will to live. How many more need to suffer while you gather evidence? Ms. Chen, if we move too early and spook either Carruthers or his inside source, they'll disappear. We'll lose everything, and he'll just set up shop somewhere else with a new identity. I walked into Mom's kitchen, needing space to think. Through the window, I could see her neighbor Mrs. Kim tending to her garden, the same Mrs. Kim who'd mentioned receiving calls from a medical foundation last month during their weekly coffee date. Detective Rodriguez, what if I told you I might be able to help with your evidence problem? I'd tell you to stay out of police business. And I'd remind you that I'm a CPA with forensic accounting experience and a very personal stake in this case. I checked my watch, 10:47 a.m. 3 hours and 13 minutes until Carruthers called. What exactly do you need to prove he has an inside source? Another long pause. We need evidence of the information exchange. Proof that protected health information is being shared before Carruthers makes contact with victims. But hospital records are locked down tight, and we can't get surveillance warrants without stronger probable cause. An idea began forming, dangerous, probably illegal, but potentially brilliant. What if you had real-time evidence? What if you could observe the information transfer happening? That would require us to predict when and how. Rodriguez stopped abruptly. Ms. Chen, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Vincent Carruthers is about to get a very interesting phone call at 2 o'clock today. But not from my mother. Absolutely not. You are not going undercover in an active police investigation. I'm not going undercover, I said, watching Mom through the doorway as she carefully folded her bank statements back into their envelope. I'm going to give Dr. Henderson exactly what he wants, another vulnerable cancer patient with a substantial inheritance to donate. And who exactly would this fictional patient be? I smiled grimly, my reflection staring back at me from Mom's kitchen window. Me. The plan crystallized over the next 2 hours, fueled by rage and 3 cups of Mom's too-strong coffee. Detective Rodriguez had reluctantly agreed to monitor the call, but only after I'd threatened to proceed with or without police involvement. Sometimes being a CPA meant knowing exactly which regulatory agencies would be very interested in a police department's failure to protect elderly fraud victims. Margaret Chin Williams, I said to Mom, testing out my fictional identity. Recently divorced, inherited $120,000 from my ex-husband's life insurance policy after his sudden death from pancreatic cancer last month. Currently undergoing my own treatment for early-stage cervical cancer at Presbyterian. Mom looked horrified. Sweetheart, you can't pretend to have cancer. That's exactly what will make Carruthers bite, I interrupted, reviewing my hastily constructed backstory. A grieving widow with a fresh inheritance and active treatment. He won't be able to resist. The key was making my fictional medical history recent enough that it wouldn't be in any existing database, but detailed enough to sound authentic. I'd spent an hour researching cervical cancer treatment protocols, memorizing drug names and side effects until I could discuss them convincingly. At 1:30 p.m., I watched Mom's hands shake as she stared at her phone. We'd agreed she would answer initially, then hand the call over to me after a few minutes of normal conversation. What if he realizes something's wrong, she whispered. He won't, I said with more confidence than I felt. Sociopaths like Carruthers are arrogant. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else, especially his victims' families. Detective Rodriguez's voice crackled through my earpiece. She'd insisted on monitoring the call in real time. Chen, remember, we need him to reveal information he shouldn't have access to. Push him on specifics about your fictional medical history. At exactly 2 p.m., Mom's phone rang. Her caller ID displayed Henderson Foundation, just as it had for 8 months. Hello. Mom's voice wavered slightly. Eleanor. How are you feeling today, dear? The warm, professionally modulated voice made my skin crawl. This was him, Vincent Carruthers, destroyer of families, killer of hope. Oh, hello Dr. Henderson. I'm actually not alone today. Oh. I hope everything's alright with your health. You know how concerned we all are about your well-being. The manipulation was immediate and expertly applied, positioning himself as part of Mom's medical support team, expressing personal concern that felt intimate and caring. Actually, my daughter is here visiting. Margaret. She's been going through a difficult time. A pause. I could almost hear the predator's interest sharpening. I'm so sorry to hear that, Eleanor. Would it be appropriate for me to speak with her? We often find that supporting cancer patients runs in families, both genetically and emotionally. Mom looked at me, and I nodded, taking the phone. This is Margaret, I said, injecting my voice with the exhausted vulnerability I'd heard in Mom's tone for months. Margaret, hello. Your mother has told me so much about you. I'm Dr. James Henderson from the Henderson Cancer Research Foundation. Please accept my condolences. Your mother mentioned you lost your husband recently. My blood chilled. Mom had never mentioned anything about a husband to Carruthers, fictional or otherwise. I'd only decided on the recent widowhood angle this morning. Yes. Thank you. I caught Detective Rodriguez's sharp attention through the earpiece. Pancreatic cancer, wasn't it? Such an aggressive disease. I imagine the diagnosis came very suddenly. I hadn't mentioned pancreatic cancer to anyone except Mom 2 hours ago, in this very room. Dr. Henderson, I said carefully, how did you know about my husband's diagnosis? A smooth chuckle. Oh, forgive me. Your mother mentioned it during one of our previous conversations, I believe. When you're dealing with as many families as we do, sometimes the details blend together. But Mom was shaking her head frantically, mouthing, I never told him that. And I understand you're facing your own health challenges now. Carruthers continued. Cervical cancer, your mother said. How are you responding to treatment? The room seemed to spin. I had invented the cervical cancer story just hours ago. The only people who knew about it were Mom, Detective Rodriguez, and me. Unless Vincent Carruthers was listening to us right now. My hands went numb around the phone. The only way Carruthers could know about my fictional cervical cancer diagnosis was if he'd been listening to our conversation in this room, right now, today. I'm sorry, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. Could you repeat that? The connection seems poor. I was asking about your cervical cancer treatment, Carruthers said, his tone still warm and concerned. Early stage, I believe your mother mentioned. Stage 1B. I had never said stage 1B to anyone. I'd researched it this morning but never spoke those specific words aloud. My eyes darted frantically around Mom's kitchen, searching for anything that looked wrong, out of place. The ceramic rooster on the windowsill. The magnetic notepad on the refrigerator. The new digital picture frame Mom had received last Christmas, sitting innocuously on the counter with its rotating display of family photos. The picture frame. I'd never seen it before yesterday. Dr. Henderson, I said, standing up and walking slowly toward the device, I'm curious how you knew my mother was a cancer survivor when you first called her. You mentioned having access to a survivor registry. Oh yes, we work with several databases. Medical facilities are very generous in sharing information when it's for legitimate research purposes. The picture frame was plugged into the wall, its small LED indicator glowing green. I knelt down and found the model number, SX2400 digital frame with Wi-Fi connectivity and voice activation. Voice activation. That's fascinating, I continued, my pulse hammering as I examined the device more closely. Which facilities specifically? I work in healthcare administration myself. I'd love to understand how that information sharing works. Through my earpiece, I heard Detective Rodriguez's sharp intake of breath. She was putting it together too. Well, that gets quite technical, Carruthers deflected smoothly. But speaking of your situation, Margaret, I understand you recently inherited some funds from your husband's life insurance policy. $120,000, your mother mentioned. I had never told Mom a specific dollar amount. I'd only mentioned $120,000 to Detective Rodriguez during our phone call this morning, and to Mom during our conversation in this kitchen 2 hours ago. With shaking hands, I unplugged the picture frame. The green LED died immediately. Dr. Henderson, I said, walking back toward Mom with the device in my hands, I think we have a bad connection. Could you call back in a few minutes? Of course, dear. These things happen. I'll try you again in. I hung up before he could finish and immediately dialed Detective Rodriguez's direct line. Rodriguez here. He's been listening to us, I said without preamble. There's a surveillance device in Mom's kitchen disguised as a digital picture frame. He knew details I never shared with anyone except during conversations in this room. Jesus. Where did your mother get the frame? I looked at Mom, who had gone pale. Mom, the picture frame, where did it come from? Her hands fluttered to her throat. It was a gift. From Dr. Henderson's foundation. He sent it last Christmas with a lovely note thanking me for my donations. Said it was programmed with inspirational images for cancer survivors. Son of a bitch, Rodriguez breathed through the phone. He's been conducting surveillance on his victims to gather information for future calls. That's how he knew personal details, medical information, family situations. I stared at the innocent-looking device, realizing the full scope of Carruthers' violation. For 8 months, he'd been listening to Mom's private conversations, her phone calls with doctors, her discussions about finances with me. He'd heard her crying at night, heard her worry about money, heard her guilt about spending Dad's insurance settlement. Detective, I said, my voice deadly quiet, how many other victims do you think have these devices in their homes? Based on the victim complaints we've received. At least 15 households. Maybe more. 15 families who thought they were displaying cherished memories while actually broadcasting their most private moments to a predator. 15 homes where every conversation about medical appointments, financial concerns, and family problems had been weaponized against elderly cancer survivors. Rodriguez, I continued, what's the penalty for interstate surveillance and wiretapping without consent? Federal charges. Minimum 5 years, maximum 20 per violation. Why? I looked at Mom, who was now staring at the picture frame with a mixture of horror and rage that I'd inherited from her in spades. Because Vincent Carruthers just graduated from fraud to federal surveillance crimes, I said. And I'm about to make sure he pays for every single violation. The phone rang again. Henderson Foundation on the caller ID. This time, I was ready for him. I answered the phone on the first ring, my voice steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. Hello, Dr. Henderson. Margaret. I'm so sorry about that connection issue. These digital phone systems can be temperamental. His warm, grandfatherly tone made my skin crawl now that I knew what he really was. I was hoping we could continue our conversation about how the Henderson Foundation might be able to help during this difficult time. Of course, I said, settling back into my chair while Detective Rodriguez listened through my earpiece. The unplugged surveillance device sat on the table between Mom and me like evidence of violated trust. I have to admit, I'm impressed by how much you seem to know about cancer patients and their families. Well, it's our life's work, Carruthers replied smoothly. When you've been in this field as long as I have, you develop an intuition about what people are going through. The emotional journey, the financial pressures. I decided to test exactly how much information his listening device had collected over the months. My mother mentioned you knew her oncologist's name when you first called. Dr. Valdez, wasn't it? That's quite impressive for a foundation based in New Mexico. Oh, Dr. Patricia Valdez, yes. Wonderful physician. We actually have connections throughout the Southwest medical community. In fact, I believe your mother had her lumpectomy procedure on a Thursday morning in September 2019. Presbyterian Hospital, Surgical Suite 3. Mom's eyes went wide. That level of detail wasn't in any public record or social media post. How could you possibly know which surgical suite? I began. Medical collaboration, my dear. When you're saving lives, information sharing becomes crucial. He pivoted smoothly. But let's focus on your situation. I understand you're currently receiving treatment at Presbyterian as well. This was my chance to catch him in real-time surveillance. Actually, Dr. Henderson, I need to correct something my mother told you. I'm not being treated at Presbyterian. A brief pause. Oh. I thought. I'm receiving care at University of New Mexico Hospital instead. Different oncology team entirely. This was completely fabricated, but I needed to see how he'd handle contradictory information. Of course, forgive the confusion. UNM has an excellent program. Dr. Sarah Martinez is doing groundbreaking work in their cervical cancer research division. My blood froze. There was no Dr. Sarah Martinez at UNM. I checked their entire oncology staff online this morning. But more importantly, I had never mentioned which hospital I was supposedly using for treatment. The only way he could have responded so quickly with a fake doctor's name was if he had someone else feeding him information in real time. Someone with access to hospital directories and staff listings. Dr. Martinez, yes, I said carefully. Though I have to ask, how did you know I was being treated at UNM? I don't recall mentioning that. Another pause, longer this time. I believe, didn't you just tell me that? No, Dr. Henderson. I said I wasn't being treated at Presbyterian, but I never said where I was being treated instead. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. When Carruthers spoke again, some of the warmth had leached out of his voice. Well, Margaret, sometimes when you talk to as many patients as I do, the details can get mixed up. The important thing is that you're receiving quality care. Through my earpiece, Detective Rodriguez whispered urgently, he's got someone else on the line feeding him information. Keep him talking. Of course, I said aloud. Dr. Henderson, I'm very interested in learning more about your foundation's work. Could you send me some detailed financial reports? As someone who works in healthcare administration, I like to research organizations thoroughly before making any commitments. Naturally. Though I should mention that our most recent quarterly report shows we're just $12,000 away from fully funding a critical research trial. The timing is quite urgent. If we don't secure funding by Monday, we'll lose 6 months of progress. The same manufactured urgency he'd used on Mom countless times. Create false scarcity, impose artificial deadlines, exploit the victim's desire to help. 12,000 is quite specific, I noted. Yes, well, research budgets are very precise. And given your recent inheritance situation, I thought perhaps, but of course, I don't want to pressure you during such a difficult time. There it was, the hook, baited with false concern and delivered with practiced expertise. What exactly would my contribution fund? I asked. Breakthrough treatment protocols that could help patients just like you, Margaret. Just like your late husband. Just like your mother. His voice dropped to an intimate whisper. Imagine if we could spare other families the pain you've endured. The manipulation was flawless, perfectly calibrated to exploit grief, hope, and survivor's guilt simultaneously. But Vincent Carruthers had made one critical error. He had no idea he was trying to scam someone who understood exactly how predators like him operated. Dr. Henderson, I said, injecting just the right amount of vulnerable uncertainty into my voice, this is all happening so fast. The inheritance money is still tied up in probate, and my lawyer advised me to be careful about large financial decisions while I'm undergoing treatment. Of course. Though I have to ask, who is your probate attorney? We work with several estate lawyers who understand the tax advantages of charitable giving during the probate process. I nearly dropped the phone. There was no probate. There was no inheritance. There was no dead husband. But Carruthers was fishing for my lawyer's information with the confidence of someone who'd successfully extracted similar details from other victims. Johnson and Associates, I lied smoothly, naming the first law firm that came to mind. Ah, downtown firm. I believe we've worked with them before. Is that Patricia Johnson or Michael Johnson handling your case? Neither. I'd made up the entire firm name. But his instant follow-up with specific attorney names meant he was cross-referencing information in real time, probably through his inside source at Presbyterian or through some other database access. Through my earpiece, Rodriguez whispered, "He's got active database access. Keep him on the line, we're tracing the data queries." "Actually, it's David Johnson," I said, adding another fictional layer. "David, yes. Excellent attorney. He handled the Pemberton family's estate last year, another cancer family, very similar situation to yours." Carruthers' voice regained its warm confidence. "In fact, the Pembertons made a substantial contribution to our foundation as part of their estate planning. Tax-deductible, naturally." My stomach lurched. Was he talking about real people? How many families had he researched, catalogued, and exploited? The Pembertons? I prompted. Lovely couple. Richard passed from lung cancer in 2022, left Margaret, another Margaret, like you, with a considerable inheritance. She donated $43,000 over 6 months before her own diagnosis progressed. The casual way he discussed someone's death, someone's financial ruin, as if they were just data points in his profit spreadsheet made me physically nauseous. Her own diagnosis progressed. I managed. Stage 4 pancreatic, very aggressive. She passed last spring, but her final contribution helped fund the research protocol that might have saved her if we'd had it 6 months earlier. A theatrical sigh. That's why timing is so critical, Margaret. Every day we delay is another family facing what you've already endured. He was using a dead woman's tragedy to manipulate me into giving him money faster. The sociopathic calculation was breathtaking. "Dr. Henderson," I said, my voice barely steady, "I'd like to make a contribution today. But I need to understand the payment process. How exactly do I transfer the funds?" "Wonderful. We use a secure wire transfer system for larger donations. Much safer than checks, and it ensures the money reaches our research accounts immediately." "What's the account information?" "Well, for security purposes, I'll need to verify a few details first. Can you confirm your mother's social security number? It's how we link family donations in our system." Mom's eyes went wide with alarm. I held up a hand to reassure her. "I'm not comfortable sharing that information over the phone," I said. "Of course, very wise. How about this, I'll call you back in 30 minutes from our secure verification line. That will give you time to gather your bank information as well. We'll need your account details to process the wire transfer." "That sounds perfect," I said, while Detective Rodriguez's voice crackled urgently in my ear. "Don't give him any real financial information. We've got what we need." "Excellent. And Margaret? Thank you for trusting us with your family's legacy. Your husband would be so proud." The line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone with shaking hands. Vincent Carruthers had just made his final mistake. The 30-minute window Carruthers had given me felt like the eye of a hurricane, deceptively calm while chaos prepared to unleash around us. Detective Rodriguez had arrived at Mom's house within 15 minutes, accompanied by FBI agent Lisa Park from the Cybercrimes Division. The kitchen that had been our war room now resembled an actual command center, with laptops, recording equipment, and Mom's violated digital frame sitting like evidence of a much larger crime. "Margaret," Agent Park said, connecting her own recording device to Mom's phone line, "we need you to understand what's about to happen when he calls back. Based on the database queries we tracked during your conversation, Carruthers accessed Presbyterian Hospital's patient record 17 times in 20 minutes. I looked up from the script we'd been preparing. 17 times. Patient information, staff directories, insurance records, even pharmacy databases. Someone inside Presbyterian's IT system is feeding him real-time information." Park's expression was grim. The queries came from inside the hospital's network, but they're being routed through multiple proxy servers to obscure the source. Mom, who had been unusually quiet since learning about the surveillance device, finally spoke up. "Agent Park, how many other people like me are there? Sitting in their kitchens with those picture frames, having their entire lives broadcast to this monster?" "Based on the shipping records we've subpoenaed, 47 devices have been sent to cancer patients across 5 states over the past 18 months, Park replied. "Total confirmed financial losses are approaching $800,000. $800,000. 47 families." The scope was staggering. "But here's what's really disturbing," Detective Rodriguez added, pulling up a file on her laptop. "Cross-referencing the victim list with obituary records, we found that 12 of the targeted patients have died in the past year." "From what?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Various causes, but 7 of them occurred within weeks of the victims discovering they'd been scammed. Heart attacks, strokes, what one family described as dying from a broken heart." Rodriguez's voice carried barely controlled anger. "Mrs. Patterson from your mother's support group. She was one of them." Mom's face crumpled. "Emma Patterson died because of him." Her daughter found records showing Mrs. Patterson had donated $68,000 over 6 months. The stress of losing her deceased husband's entire retirement account. Rodriguez didn't finish the sentence. The room fell silent except for the electronic hum of surveillance equipment. I stared at the innocent-looking picture frame, imagining it multiplied across dozens of homes, in dozens of kitchens, listening to dozens of families' most private moments being cataloged and weaponized. "When he calls back," I said quietly, "what's our endgame? We get him to admit to the surveillance, then what?" Agent Park checked her watch, 2:37 p.m. 8 minutes until Carruthers called. "We need him to reveal his inside source. The person feeding him hospital data is the key to this entire operation. Without that connection, he's just another phone scammer. With it, we can prove organized fraud, identity theft, and federal surveillance violations." "How do we get him to reveal his source?" "By giving him information he can't verify through normal channels," Rodriguez explained. "We're going to feed him details about a fictional patient that only his inside contact could confirm or deny. When he responds with verification, we'll know the information came from inside Presbyterian's system." Mom's phone rang at exactly 2:45 p.m., the caller ID again showing Henderson Foundation. This time, we were all ready for Vincent Carruthers. But none of us were prepared for the voice that answered when I picked up the phone. "Hello, Margaret. This is Dr. Patricia Valdez from Presbyterian Hospital. I believe we need to talk. The voice on the other end of the line made my blood turn to ice. Dr. Patricia Valdez, Mom's real oncologist, the woman who had guided her through surgery and chemotherapy 3 years ago, was calling on Vincent Carruthers' number. Dr. Valdez? I managed, my eyes darting to Agent Park, who was frantically signaling her recording equipment. This is Margaret Shin. You treated my mother, Eleanor. Yes, Margaret. And I'm calling because I know you've been investigating the Henderson Foundation calls your mother has been receiving. Her voice carried a tremor I'd never heard during Mom's medical appointments, fear, guilt, something that made my stomach clench with dread. Mom had gone completely pale, her hands pressed against her mouth as she stared at the phone. Dr. Valdez, I said carefully, how did you get this number? We were expecting a call from Dr. Henderson. A long pause filled with the sound of labored breathing. Margaret, there is no Dr. Henderson. There never was. It's been me making those calls. All of them. The kitchen seemed to tilt sideways. Detective Rodriguez grabbed my arm to steady me while Agent Park began typing furiously on her laptop. That's impossible, I whispered. Dr. Henderson is Vincent Carruthers in Albuquerque. We have records, business registrations. Vincent Carruthers is my son, Dr. Valdez interrupted, her voice breaking completely. My son who's been blackmailing me for 18 months. My son who threatened to destroy my medical practice and expose my gambling debts unless I helped him target my own patients. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Mom's trusted oncologist, the woman who had saved her life, who she praised countless times for her compassion and expertise, had been systematically betraying her patients to a criminal son. The patient information, I said numbly. The medical details he knew. Came directly from my files. Patient histories, treatment schedules, family situations, financial information from insurance claims. Dr. Valdez was crying now. He made me install remote access software on my computer. Every night, he'd download everything. Names, addresses, medical vulnerabilities he could exploit. Through my earpiece, I heard Agent Park coordinating with what sounded like multiple law enforcement agencies. This was no longer just a fraud investigation, it was a massive medical privacy violation involving a licensed physician. Dr. Valdez, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, why are you calling now? Why are you confessing? Because Emma Patterson is dead, she sobbed. Because 12 of my patients have died from the stress of losing their life savings to my son's lies. Because I can't pretend anymore that I'm not responsible for their deaths. Mom finally found her voice. Patricia, how could you? I trusted you with my life. Eleanor, God help me, I know. I tried to stop it. Last month, I told Vincent I wouldn't give him any more information. That's when he showed me the evidence. What evidence? Proof of my gambling addiction. Forged prescriptions I'd written to pay off debts. Patient medications I'd diverted to sell. He had documentation of everything, enough to destroy my career and send me to prison. Her voice dropped to a whisper. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd release it all and frame me as the mastermind of the entire fraud operation. Agent Park was now speaking rapidly into her radio, coordinating what sounded like simultaneous arrests. We need units at Presbyterian Hospital immediately. Dr. Patricia Valdez, possible flight risk. And maintain surveillance on all Vincent Carruthers aliases in New Mexico. Dr. Valdez, I continued, where is Vincent now? He's supposed to be in Albuquerque, but I think he's here. In Denver. He called me this morning from a local number, said something had gone wrong with the Chin family contact. He was angry, suspicious that something wasn't right about your medical information. My pulse hammered. Carruthers was here, in the city, possibly watching us right now. He knows we're onto him. I think so. He's been paranoid for weeks, talking about exit strategies and offshore accounts. Margaret, he's not just a con artist, he's dangerous. When that family in Phoenix tried to expose him last year, their house was broken into the same night. Nothing was stolen, but their medical records were scattered everywhere. A warning. The implications were terrifying. We weren't just dealing with financial fraud anymore, we were dealing with someone willing to escalate to intimidation and possibly violence to protect his operation. Dr. Valdez, I need you to listen very carefully, I said, watching Agent Park coordinate with multiple law enforcement agencies through hand signals. Are you at the hospital right now? Yes, in my office. I've been here all day, afraid to leave. Stay exactly where you are. Federal agents are coming to you right now. You're going to be okay. But even as I said the words, I wasn't sure I believed them. Because somewhere in Denver, Vincent Carruthers knew his operation was crumbling, and he knew exactly where to find us. Agent Park's radio crackled with urgent chatter as she coordinated the arrest teams heading to Presbyterian Hospital. Dr. Valdez is in custody, she announced, ending the call. But we have a problem. Vincent Carruthers cleared out of his Albuquerque apartment yesterday. His neighbors saw him loading boxes into a rental truck. My hands went cold around the phone. He's running. Worse, Detective Rodriguez said, studying her laptop screen with growing alarm. We just got the financial records from his shell companies. In the past 72 hours, he's liquidated everything. 4 separate bank accounts, totaling over $600,000, all transferred to cryptocurrency wallets. Mom sank into her chair, the weight of betrayal etched across her face. He's going to disappear, isn't he? With everyone's money. Before anyone could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Margaret, we need to meet. You have something that belongs to me. Dr. Henderson. Agent Park read the message over my shoulder, her expression darkening. He's here. In Denver. She immediately started typing a response. We're going to set up a controlled meeting. Absolutely not, I said, snatching my phone back. You just said he's dangerous. He's already proven he'll break into people's homes. Another text appeared, the storage unit key your mother has. I need it back. 1 hour, Cherry Creek Mall food court. Come alone, or I release medical records for every patient in Patricia's files. Mom looked confused. What storage unit key? I don't have any. She stopped mid-sentence, her face going ashen. Oh God. The little brass key he sent me last Christmas. With the picture frame. He said it was for a safety deposit box where they kept backup research data, in case I ever wanted to verify how my donations were being used. Where is it? Agent Park demanded. Mom fumbled toward her purse with shaking hands, pulling out a small brass key attached to a keychain reading, Henderson Foundation, Building Hope. It looked innocuous enough, but the implications were staggering. He's been planning his exit strategy for months, I realized. That key accesses whatever he couldn't liquidate electronically. Physical documents, maybe cash reserves, evidence he's keeping as insurance. Detective Rodriguez was already on her radio. I need units canvassing storage facilities within a 10-mile radius of Eleanor Chen's address. Look for anything rented under Henderson Foundation, Vincent Carruthers, or Patricia Valdez. My phone buzzed again, 45 minutes now. And Margaret? I know you're not really sick. But your mother's medical records are very real, and very detailed. It would be unfortunate if they became public. The threat was clear. Even if we arrested him, he had contingency plans to destroy the privacy and dignity of every patient he targeted. I'm going, I announced, ignoring the immediate chorus of objections from Agent Park and Rodriguez. Margaret, no, Mom grabbed my arm. Mom, he has medical records for 47 cancer patients. Personal information, treatment histories, family details. If those get released publicly. I didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. The secondary trauma would be devastating for families already victimized by his fraud. Agent Park studied the key in Mom's trembling fingers. What if we don't give him what he wants? What if we give him something better? Like what? She pulled out her own phone, scrolling through what looked like financial transfer records. According to the cryptocurrency traces, Vincent's digital wallet contains 847.3 Bitcoin, worth approximately $1.2 million as of this morning. The number stunned me. He hadn't just stolen from his 47 victims, he'd been running multiple operations simultaneously. Here's what we're going to do, Agent Park continued. We're going to offer Vincent Carruthers something he wants more than that storage unit key. Which is his freedom. And all the evidence that could tie him to his mother's confession. The plan crystallized quickly, and it was either brilliant or completely insane. In 30 minutes, I would walk into Cherry Creek Mall carrying a USB drive that supposedly contained all of Dr. Valdez's recorded confessions and our evidence files. The storage key would be our bargaining chip for Vincent's cryptocurrency wallet passwords. What Vincent wouldn't know was that the USB drive contained a tracking virus that would give us access to every device he'd ever used to coordinate his fraud operation. And if something goes wrong? I asked. Agent Park checked her service weapon. Then we improvise. At exactly 3:47 p.m., I walked through the entrance of Cherry Creek Mall with a USB drive in my left pocket and Mom's brass storage key clutched in my right hand. The food court buzzed with typical afternoon energy, teenagers sharing pretzels, business people grabbing coffee, elderly couples splitting desserts. Normal people living normal lives, completely unaware that a federal operation was unfolding around them. Agent Park's voice crackled softly through my nearly invisible earpiece. Target acquired. Male, approximately 55, gray sweater, northwest corner table by the Chinese place. That's him. I spotted Vincent Carruthers immediately, and the sight made my stomach lurch. He looked nothing like the distinguished Dr. Henderson from his fake website photos. This man was thin, nervous, with darting eyes that constantly scanned the crowd. His hands trembled slightly around a coffee cup that had probably gone cold an hour ago. But what disturbed me most was how ordinary he appeared. After months of imagining some kind of monster, Vincent Carruthers looked like any middle-aged man you'd pass in a grocery store. Evil, I realized, didn't always announce itself with fangs and horns. Margaret Chen, he called as I approached, his voice carrying that same warm tone that had manipulated my mother for 8 months. Hearing it in person made my skin crawl. Vincent, I replied, deliberately using his real name. The flinch that crossed his features confirmed he understood his cover was blown. Please, sit. He gestured to the chair across from him with false courtesy. I have to say, I'm impressed. Most families never figure out the scope of what we're dealing with. We're not dealing with anything, I said, settling into the chair while Agent Park whispered positioning updates in my ear. You're dealing with federal fraud charges, conspiracy, and enough HIPAA violations to put you away for decades. Vincent smiled, but it never reached his eyes. Is that what you think this is about? Simple fraud. He pulled out his own phone, scrolling to what looked like a file directory. Margaret, I have detailed medical records for every cancer patient Patricia treated in the past 3 years. Treatment plans, family financial information, insurance claims, even photographs from medical procedures. My blood ran cold. You're lying. Eleanor Chen, age 73. Invasive ductal carcinoma, left breast, diagnosed March 15, 2019. Surgical notes indicate a small tattoo on her lower back, a butterfly, I believe, that she was embarrassed for the medical team to see. His voice dropped to a whisper. Should I continue? The intimate detail about Mom's tattoo, something she'd never told anyone except Dad and her surgical team, confirmed the horrifying depth of his violation. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about the systematic exploitation of people at their most vulnerable moments. What do you want? I managed. Simple exchange. The storage unit key for my laptop passwords. Your USB drive with Patricia's confession for my guarantee that no patient records get released publicly. Vincent leaned back, projecting confidence he clearly didn't feel. Everyone walks away clean. Through my earpiece, Rodriguez whispered, storage unit located. 1247 South Broadway, Unit 73. SWAT is moving into position. I held up the brass key, watching Vincent's eyes lock onto it with desperate hunger. This key, what exactly does it access? Insurance, he replied. Physical documents, backup drives, certain items that cryptocurrency can't replace. Such as? Vincent's smile widened, and for the first time, I saw genuine malice in his expression. Birth certificates, social security cards, medical licenses. Everything needed to start over somewhere else with a completely clean identity. The realization hit like a sledgehammer. This wasn't Vincent's first operation. He'd done this before, in other cities, with other inside sources, leaving trails of destroyed families while he reinvented himself with stolen identities. How many times have you done this? I asked. Patricia was my third doctor, he admitted casually. Amazing how many physicians have gambling problems, prescription drug addictions, or malpractice settlements they'd rather keep quiet. Once you have leverage, they'll do anything to protect their careers. 3 doctors. 3 cities. Potentially hundreds of victims across multiple states. Agent Park's voice was urgent in my ear. Margaret, we found the storage unit. It's not just documents, there are computer servers, surveillance equipment, and files for operations in Phoenix, Portland, and Miami. This goes back at least 5 years. I stared at Vincent Carruthers, this ordinary-looking man who'd built a criminal empire on the systematic exploitation of cancer patients' hope and vulnerability. Vincent, I said quietly, you made one critical mistake. Really? What's that? You assumed I came here to negotiate. The look of confusion that crossed his face was the last thing I saw before Agent Park's team moved in. The food court erupted into controlled chaos as federal agents materialized from every direction. Vincent's coffee cup hit the floor, splattering cold liquid across the tile as Agent Park pressed her badge against his chest. Vincent Carruthers, you're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, and violations of federal surveillance laws. But Vincent wasn't looking at Agent Park. His eyes were locked on mine with a fury that made my blood freeze. You stupid bitch, he snarled, his warm, Dr. Henderson persona evaporating completely. You have no idea what you've just destroyed. Agent Park began reading Miranda rights while Rodriguez secured Vincent's phone and laptop bag. Around us, mall security was quietly clearing nearby tables, but I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Vincent was smiling again. Margaret, he said, his voice carrying an ominous calm despite the handcuffs being snapped around his wrists, did you really think I'd meet you without insurance? What are you talking about? Check your mother's house, he whispered as Agent Park started to lead him away. Right now. Check on Eleanor. My blood turned to ice. What did you do? I told you I had a partner in Denver. Did you think Patricia was my only local contact? Vincent's laugh was genuinely chilling. Some insurance policies require immediate activation. I was already running toward the mall exit before Agent Park could stop me, Rodriguez's voice crackling through my earpiece. All units, we need immediate response at 4847 Maple Grove Drive. Possible break-in in progress. The 15-minute drive to Mom's house felt like hours. My hands shook as I dialed her number repeatedly, each unanswered ring confirming my worst fears. Vincent had been planning for this contingency, of course he had. A man who'd spent 5 years building criminal enterprises doesn't walk into a federal sting operation without backup plans. Rodriguez's voice filled my car through the Bluetooth connection. Margaret, patrol units are 60 seconds out from your mother's address. Do not enter the house until we clear it. But as I turned onto Maple Grove Drive, I could see Mom's front door standing wide open. Her neighbor Mrs. Kim was on her own porch, frantically waving at my car. Margaret. Mrs. Kim called as I jumped out. 2 men came about 20 minutes ago. Said they were from Eleanor's doctor's office, needed to pick up some medical equipment. Eleanor went with them willingly, but something felt wrong. Did you see what kind of car? White van, no windows in the back. License plate started with CCR, I think. Mrs. Kim's voice trembled. Eleanor looked scared, but she kept saying the men knew about her cancer treatment, knew private details. She thought they were legitimate. Rodriguez's patrol units arrived as I was processing this information, officers immediately securing the scene while I stood helplessly on the sidewalk. Vincent's plan was brutally elegant, use the same medical knowledge that had made his phone scams convincing to gain physical access to his victims. Agent Park's voice crackled through my phone. Margaret, Vincent's not talking, but we found something in his storage unit. There's a second operation running parallel to the cancer scam. Elderly patients are being convinced to transfer to a fake, specialized care facility for experimental treatments. Where? I demanded, though I was already afraid of the answer. We're tracking financial records now, but Margaret, the facility doesn't exist. Patients who get transferred disappear completely from medical system records. The implication hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't just about financial fraud anymore. Vincent Carruthers had graduated to kidnapping. And somewhere in Denver, my 73-year-old mother was in the hands of people who'd made an art form of exploiting cancer patients' trust. The breakthrough came at 11:47 p.m., 6 agonizing hours after Mom had disappeared. Agent Park burst into the command center we'd established at the police station, clutching a printout that could either save my mother or confirm my worst fears. We cracked Vincent's encrypted files, she announced, her voice tight with exhaustion and adrenaline. Margaret, your mother isn't at a fake medical facility. She's at a real one. I looked up from the victim files I'd been reviewing, desperate for any clue about Vincent's partner network. What do you mean, real? Sunrise Manor Assisted Living, 2847, Federal Boulevard. It's a legitimate facility, but Vincent's been paying someone inside to house his victims temporarily before moving them to a secondary location. Agent Park spread architectural plans across the table. We think they're keeping patients sedated while they liquidate their remaining assets through forged power of attorney documents. Rodriguez leaned over the plans, tracing corridors with her finger. How many victims are we talking about? Based on the financial records, at least 12 elderly patients over the past 18 months. All supposedly transferred for specialized treatment that never existed. Agent Park's expression was grim. The good news is they're probably all still alive. Vincent needs them conscious periodically to sign additional financial documents. My hands clenched into fists. The bad news? Tomorrow is Monday. According to his encrypted calendar, that's when the current group gets transferred to the final facility. Which our analysts believe means disposed of permanently. The words hit like ice water. We had less than 8 hours to find Mom and whoever else Vincent was holding captive. At 12:23 a.m., I found myself crouched behind a maintenance shed outside Sunrise Manor, wearing a bulletproof vest that felt surreal against my accountant's blazer. Agent Park's tactical team surrounded the building while Rodriguez coordinated with local SWAT units. Infrared shows 7 individuals in the East Wing, Park whispered into her radio. That's more than we expected. Through my night vision scope, I could see into the facility's common room where several elderly people sat in wheelchairs, their heads lolling with what was clearly medication-induced drowsiness. But in the far corner, I spotted a familiar blue cardigan. That's her, I breathed. That's my mother. Mom was awake but groggy, speaking with a thin woman in scrubs who was checking her pulse. Even from this distance, I could see the confusion and fear in Mom's posture. 2 staff members visible, Rodriguez reported. No sign of heavy security. This might be easier than we thought. She was wrong. The moment Agent Park's team breached the front entrance, emergency lights flooded the building and an alarm began wailing. The woman in scrubs immediately moved toward Mom with a syringe, while a man I'd never seen before started herding the other patients toward a back exit. They're moving the victims. I shouted into my radio, abandoning protocol as I sprinted toward the building's side entrance. What happened next unfolded in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. I burst through the emergency door just as the woman reached Mom with the syringe, my voice cutting through the chaos. Eleanor. Get away from her. Mom's eyes focused on me with sudden clarity, and 3 years of cancer treatment had taught her to recognize medical danger. She grabbed the woman's wrist with surprising strength, preventing the injection while federal agents swarmed the room. By 1:47 a.m., it was over. Vincent's entire Denver operation lay in ruins, 7 elderly victims recovered alive, over $340,000 in assets frozen before transfer, and enough evidence to connect him to similar operations in 3 other states. But the moment that mattered most came when Mom and I finally embraced in a parking lot of Sunrise Manor, both of us shaking with relief and rage and the profound gratitude of people who'd almost lost everything that mattered. I never stopped believing you'd find me, she whispered against my shoulder. I knew my accountant daughter wouldn't let some con artist win. 3 months later, Vincent Carruthers was sentenced to 47 years in federal prison, 1 year for each victim whose life he'd systematically destroyed. Dr. Patricia Valdez received 12 years and permanent revocation of her medical license. Most importantly, Mom got her money back. All $53,400, plus interest, plus damages that brought her settlement to nearly $80,000. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was watching Mom testify at Vincent's sentencing hearing with the same fierce determination she'd shown fighting cancer, a 73-year-old woman who refused to let anyone steal her dignity twice. Justice, it turned out, was the best charity donation she'd ever made.